The mysteries of the kingdom. Why me and why now? Why am I making this presentation? Why me? Because I have been chosen. For several years, I rejected being chosen. I didn't ask for this job or to be chosen. I have attempted to give away this knowledge of the mysteries of the kingdom to any mainstream Torah teacher starting back 7 years ago. I thought that it would be best if this knowledge was in the hands of someone who is already a Torah teacher. None would receive this knowledge because all Torah teachers already have their own personal agenda and will not take the time to investigate this work. However, those that are not teachers, those that know there is more to learning about the Bible, they do receive this knowledge. They are the seers and hearers of the Word. They are the overcomers of revelation. They that have received this knowledge of the mysteries of the kingdom, they never follow Torah teachers again because they now see the truth hidden in the Word on their own. I am not an academic. I am not a speaker. And I am not an intellectual. Even as the viewer listens, one will note that neither am I eloquent of speech. Nevertheless, this presentation needs to be heard. I am not known to the world at large. I am not known because I have dedicated every available working hour for the past 7 years to uncovering the mysteries of the kingdom. I now have invested in excess of 20,000 hours of studies into the mysteries of the kingdom, and I still continue to this day. It doesn't really matter who I am. What matters is you, the viewer. We all left the church because we finally got tired of hearing lie after lie. Nothing changed in the church. After listening to and studying Torah portions in the Hebrew Roots movement for 2 years, I began to remember and realize why I left the church. I wasn't learning anything new from Torah portions after the first few months. Rote traditions of listening to or reading Torah portions was not producing spiritual fruit from above. There were too many opinions, too many I thinks, too many I believes. Some Torah portions cover several chapters, yet I have seen Torah teachers spend an entire session on 2 to 4 verses only. In the end, I was no better for it. After a year of hearing Torah teachers quote sages, intellectual rabbis, and white-bearded ones, I bought the Chumash Bible with commentaries from these smart ones of old. That too proved to be futile and a waste of time to learn something different other than the same old rote comments or ideas. I guess that intuitively, I was not looking for individual opinions, comments, ideas, or suppositions. I wanted something I could hold on to forever. I wanted something that never changed. After giving up on all Torah teachers, I found the forever. I found what never changes in the Word. And guess where it came from? It came from the Messiah, who is our forever. It came from the parables. It came from Him who is eternal, not from mortal men who speculate divine and devise suppositions of their intellect, and then look steely-eyed at me because I reject their images and idols. There are thousands of words, idioms, and strange and odd texts that no Torah portion study or teacher never, ever addresses. 1/3 of the Bible is written in the POETIC. No Torah portion ever. They never take whole sections or chapters and teach what the hidden messages are of the poetic texts. Torah teachers don't teach on the poetic text because they can't. They don't know the language of the Spirit. They would embarrass themselves. The dynamic of ignoring the poetic text will end in this presentation. Leaving the Hebrew roots has allowed me the time to address every single one of the oddities of the Word. I cannot explain all of them yet, but I can explain most of them. If we have the right tools to decipher these mysteries, the truth of the mysteries of the kingdom are easily revealed. There is only one answer for what a bowl judgment is, yet how many psycho answers have we received over the years? There is only one answer about what the abomination of desolation is, and the one that is taught is dead and deathly wrong. If the answer to that question is not answered from the Spirit above, if the answer to the abomination of desolation comes from the imagination of a man, it is wrong. One truth means one mind, as it states in Revelation 17 and 13. The mysteries of the kingdom are the one mind. That one mind is the only mind that can answer any scriptural question. The Messiah is our representative of the one mind. Once we are of his one mind, only then can the people unite through his one mind. Up until we unite in his one mind, all unity is a futile exercise of fruitlessness. If the answer to any of our spiritual questions does not come from the parables that Yeshua spoke, if any answer we receive comes from men of the earth, it is a lie. Why would all religions of the one true God put so much stock and spiritual collateral into the return of Messiah, and then, after he comes, ignore what he gave us by listening to imagined ideas from other men? This is insanity. We have been insane to believe that mortal intellectual men have answers to eternal questions. Yet, we seek answers from smart, well-groomed, silver-tongued men. His teachings, only the Messiah, the only eternal one we know, only he has the answers to our Torah portion study questions, not men. Yeshua himself told us in John 5:34 when he said, "Do not take counsel from men, neither am I attempting to sway the viewer to take my counsel. If what I teach is not duplicated in what the Messiah taught, then don't follow these tubes. If the mysteries of the kingdom's template is not known, embraced, and applied, then the proper answer or interpretation cannot be known of any text. Guessing games of the intellect for interpreting Scripture has never worked and never will. How many twisted distortions of why Nadab and Abihu were fried with fire have there been in the past thousands of years? There's only one answer and one mind that can explain that mystery, and it can't be explained by the intellectual mind of a man. Intellectually, who is smarter than Chuck Missler? He can't answer this question. One has to know the mysteries of the kingdom in order to see and hear that truth. Why does not a single Torah teacher explain to us the spiritual lesson of hemorrhoids in 1 Samuel chapters 5 and 6? One cannot answer that question unless one knows the mysteries of the kingdom. This hemorrhoid question can only begin to be understood if we receive the wisdom of the sower, talents, and virgins parables. Why does a mother whack the pee-pee of her kid and then in seeming disgust throw the foreskin to the ground? This two-verse text of Exodus 4:25 and 26 was strangely penned and came out of nowhere. There was no reason to write that text unless there was a spiritual law to learn from it, just as there is an eternal spiritual law regarding hemorrhoids. The mysteries of the kingdom teach us that law. Not a single intellectual mind in a million years could explain the law being taught in Exodus 4. Not a single intellectual mind could give us the proper and true spiritual meaning for those strange texts. Yet I would be willing to bet there are millions of speculated opinions of the foreskin and hemorrhoid texts. Sorry, I cannot enunciate the plural of the text, but both of these texts are absolutely bizarre. I explain both of these texts in other written work. There are over 8,600 Hebrew words in the Bible. Every noun and verb has a mystery paradigm associated with it. As a way to keep track of my study information, I started a document in 2013. That document is now well over 300 pages. I call it a concordance because it lists every noun and verb of the Hebrew language. This concordance is now listed in the Library of Congress and copyrighted. Most of the concordance consists of explanations and commentaries. Within the 300 pages is a 22-page section with a sequential listing of every strong number in a 4-column format. The current slide that the viewer sees is a single page excerpted from the concordance paradigm document. This excerpt is distorted because of formatting difficulties. Since the summer of 2013, I have continued to compile notes and commentaries in this document. Within that document, I have listed approximately 5,000 of the 8,600 Hebrew words in a 4-column arrangement. In these past 4 years, I have been able to assign a paradigm value to each one of the 5,000 words. The paradigm value is derived from following the patterns of use of each mention of each of the 5,000 words. In other words, I had to look up each word of those 5,000 words every time it was used in the scriptures, at least one or more times. Actually, many times in most cases. These paradigm values are the mysteries of the kingdom. A random sample page of this 4-column listing of words is what the viewer is seeing in the slide right now. When the paradigm value is attached to each written word in the text, the reader has a guide to see the hidden mysteries of the kingdom. This document will be available to anyone who requests it. However, one must first read and understand all the paradigms of the mysteries of the kingdom first from all of my written work. In other words, the concordance is useless unless one has done the homework to earn the privilege of having the concordance. I will talk more about this at the end of the presentation. In the introduction to the mysteries of the kingdom, we noted that even the patriarchs and authors of the original manuscripts did not know. They were not privy to the mysteries of the kingdom. It was the Messiah Yeshua that told us this hard reality in Matthew 13 in verses 17 and 35. The mysteries of the kingdom have been with us since the beginning, but we never had access to the tools. These tools are the keys that we spoke of in the introduction. These keys unlock the mysteries of old that Yeshua spoke some 2,000 years ago, called the parables. Can the mysteries of the kingdom bring us wisdom? As I begin to drop some knowledge on the viewer without explanation, don't freak out at any conclusion that you hear until you hear the complete presentation and all subsequent written material. The keys of the mysteries of the kingdom reveal hidden meanings for idioms like birds of the air, beasts of the field, house of thorns, apple of the eye, Mount Zion, Armageddon, abomination of desolation, four corners of the earth, the seals, the trumpets, to and fro, thorns in your house, bold judgments, Garden of Eden, pillar of cloud, pillar of smoke, darkness, thick clouds, and black smoke. Every single one of these idioms are posted randomly from my short-sighted memory. There are untold hundreds of these idioms throughout the Word. The revealing of their underlying and hidden secret meaning is completely locked up in understanding the mysteries of the kingdom. The sower, talents, and virgin parables reveal every single idiom of the book. There are deep hidden mysteries even in the feasts of Shabbat, Passover, Feast of Weeks, and Tabernacles. Seemingly benign words like the following harbor eternal laws of Elohim. As I name some of these words, consider how often and consider the context that these words are used in. The surrounding text with which they are used are clues that Yahweh is leaving us to discern a secret. Earth, seeds, water, air, light, dark, day, evening, give, take, fall, pour, lift, come, go, years, and a house. These are a minuscule handful of examples of seemingly benign or static space fillers of the word. Yet every noun and verb, no matter how seemingly insignificant it may appear to be, they are not irrelevant, inspired murmurs from Elohim. Strange and odd words ubiquitously permeate the text. It is obvious by the surrounding context that these words harbor much deeper meanings than their apparent literal text would have us believe. In Isaiah 27:1, who or what is Leviathan or the serpent? How does one slay a dragon when dragons don't exist? What is a dragon? How can this dragon or jackal honor Elohim? In Isaiah 43:20. If the dragons are not an indistinct ethereal myth, there has to be another meaning, right? In Psalm 74:13, the same strong 8577 dragon is called a sea serpent, which has his head broken. If there are no redundancies in the word, what does this mean? Is it possible that parables are capable to give us keys to these mysteries? Can a pattern be derived from the 30, 60, 100 folds of Matthew 13 and the 5, 2, and single talent servants of the Matthew 25 talents parable? The dragon and Leviathan are metaphors for a much deeper spiritual meaning. But what? What spiritual fruit do they harbor? If a dragon, jackal, or Leviathan are representative of other deep, hidden spiritual meanings, what do words like unicorns, worms, maggots, wormwood, wild goats, or bulls, what do these mean? Again, none of these words can be understood unless we can associate a pattern of use that is connected to the parable mysteries. Wind directions. There are 4 wind directions. Each of those wind directions categorically and always has a clear and distinct hidden spiritual meaning. In this presentation and all of my subsequent written material, it is impossible to reach certain and specific eternal conclusions of the laws of Elohim if we cannot identify the metaphor for each of the 4 directions of the winds. We cannot reach the 1,000-year kingdom age without this knowledge. East is the Messiah, and he is the 12th king. He is also known as Gog, we will find out later. West, the west direction of the wind, is the little horn in Daniel 7. He is also known as the 11th king, we will find out. And as well, he is the Magog that comes out of Gog. In other words, the 11th king comes out of the 12th king. I'm just dropping this on you now, and we'll pick it up later. The north direction, the birds of the air. These are kings. The 10 is the number for these 10 kings. South, this references the beasts of the field. These are the priests of the next kingdom age. We will cover all of these wind directions in this presentation. It is not possible to have stationary dimensional corners of anything that is round. It is not possible to establish 4 corners of a beard. That has to mean something else. Once we understand that these are hidden mystery metaphors, then we can also know that these 4 wind directions are the 4 corners of the earth wherever that idiomatic expression is used in the literal text. The literal text cannot explain these hidden spiritual laws of Elohim from the text. The answers can only be derived from the mysteries of the kingdom. The metals. The metals are representative of precise and specific eternal spiritual laws as well. Except for iron and bronze, I do not elucidate on these metals much in this presentation. I do that in other written work. Look at the slide and note the metaphors. Iron is the 12th king, the Messiah. Lead is the 11th king, the little horn of Daniel 7. Tin, T-I-N, is a representation of the 10 kings, T-E-N. Gold represents all kings and priests. Bronze equals all of the priests. Every king, note this, every king is also a priest. Silver references the 60-fold. The 4 wind directions has no association with the lower kingdom. Note that here with the metals, there is 1 metal associated with the 60-fold and none with the 30-fold. Question: why would the 100-fold and the 60-fold be associated with metals while the 30-fold is not? Yeshua anchor pointed that answer for us in Matthew 25, verses 21 and 23. These are the 5 and 2 talent servants which are rewarded. They were called rulers of many. Anchor pointing the answer to our questions establishes the source of the answer to the words of Messiah. I did not make a supposition, opine, I think, or I believe statement. Study this slide for a moment. Everything about this presentation is anchor pointed to the parable paradigms. I should explain. I will not always anchor point every single item, word, or phrase in this presentation because most or many times the paradigm is unknown to the viewer. It would be a distraction and take up too much time to do that. Just know that I come to no conclusion unless I can connect an explanation to the parable paradigms. My toughest challenge is to make sure that I explain things well enough for the viewer to see these anchor points for themselves. Numbers mean things. The first 12 numbers of the word are all spiritual metaphors that portend, foreshadow, and foretell of more deeper and hidden eternal spiritual laws of Elohim. For instance, number 5 means a priest. Number 10 equals a king. Number 7 also equals a king. Number 11 equals the 11th king. And number 12 equals the 12th king. We'll take up all of these numbers later on in much deeper detail. Each number of the first 12 numbers has very specific spiritual meanings for us that foretell of our future 1,000-year age. Just so I don't confuse or mislead the viewer, I must disclose that every number also has several nuanced meanings. The text determines those nuances. Discerning these nuances is called the language of the Spirit. The more we expose ourselves to, the more we see how these numbers are used in their various nuanced texts, the more and sooner we will be able to speak the language of the Spirit. The easiest number to track and understand is the number 10. We will eliminate all doubt as to the precise meaning of number 10 as a king of the next age very shortly. All the numbers are inextricably connected to the sower, talents, and virgin parables that Messiah secretly taught us. We will first show the patterns of use of these numbers. After we see a continued and repeating pattern, we will then call it a paradigm. All paradigms are eternal laws of Elohim. After we have the knowledge and wisdom of the spiritual meanings of several of the first 12 numbers, we will then be able to go to the poetic texts, writings, and uncover the true and hidden fruit of the Spirit underneath those works. The poetic text cannot be understood by reading the literal text. We must have the understanding of the hidden metaphors, including the numbers, to have that wisdom. Impossible verses of the literal text like the doors of a womb, the mountains that skip like rams, mountains and hills break forth into singing, trees clapping their hands, the earth will disclose her blood. Who can open the doors of his face? The walls are lamenting. Yah appoints salvation for walls and bulwarks. We will be able to understand hidden and eternal spiritual wisdom of these verses and all of the poetic texts once we learn how to speak the language of the Spirit. Once we understand the language of the Spirit, we will then be able to not only read and understand the poetic texts, we will finally be able to read and understand all of the mysteries of Daniel and Revelation. Is this hyperbolic, overstated, and exaggerated rhetoric? Absolutely not. I do not have time to play games. Once we learn the language of the Spirit via the mystery patterns and paradigms of the parables, once we learn this language, we will be able to see and hear. Once we learn how the Spirit moves in the Word, we will be the overcomers of Revelation. I must warn the viewer and listener, this is a new language. Zephaniah 3:9 calls this a pure language. As with any new language, there will be times when some things of this new language will be hard to understand. One must be serious about his or her desire to know the things of the Spirit. One must take to heart the words and then diligently seek. The more one applies oneself, the more and the faster one will learn the language of the Spirit. I have witnessed people learn this language in as little as a single month. Yeshua told us that more will be given to the one that seeks and finds these mysteries. Matthew 13, verses 11 to 13. The only way to learn this new language is to completely immerse oneself in it. Certain aspects of this new language are very simple. Other parts of this language are more complex to follow. In the end, we know that it is possible to learn this language because many already have learned it. These that have learned this language are the overcomers. In the Word, Yahweh also calls these overcomers many waters. This is an example where anchor points apply, but we cannot get distracted by that right now. We need to keep going. Anchor pointing the many waters and the overcomers of the Word will come much later, after we learn more of this new language. As I begin to teach this new language, I will not speak from my opinion. I have no opinions worth uttering. I will never say, I think or I believe. I never teach a thing without connecting the dots of one scripture to the next. Because of time constraints, I will not always post every connecting scriptural passage. A certain amount of due diligence of the viewer is required. It is assumed that most who are viewing this tube already have a substantial background in scriptural knowledge. For that reason, I will often not take the time or space to quote chapter and verse. Sometimes I will say things that are not understood immediately. As with any new language, certain words heard for the first time will not be understood. Does this invalidate the language? No. This means that more or continued knowledge is necessary to continue to learn. I already know the language of the Spirit. It is incumbent on the viewer to commit to due diligence. I have written close to another 1,000 pages of other work that details any premise that I speak in this or any presentation. I cannot afford the time, nor is it possible to elucidate on every topic or subject matter. The learning student will have to pick up on that on his own. Any topic or subject matter that is not understood by the viewer can further be investigated by reading more material. This presentation is the footing, the groundwork that will facilitate the ability to read and understand any written work that I have produced. There are exactly and only two types of communication that is available to us from Elohim. The first and most readily available to us is the literal text of the Word. Make note and always learn to associate this, that is, the literal text is the horizontal things of the earth. The earth is how Yah references the horizontal things of our earthly and present world. Horizontal is a word that I have coined based on the spiritual dynamic that means the earth. I do this so that we are then able to differentiate between this first form of communication and the second form of communication called the vertical. In the Word, this vertical form of communication is called above. The slide indicates the blue 100-fold section as above. We will go to some verses and explain this, but first, let me say a little more about the horizontal communication and the vertical. We absolutely must learn to differentiate and separate the difference between these two forms of communication from Elohim, the earth below and the heaven above. All religionists already know and agree that the Bible is the inspired word of Elohim. I don't quote these verses because they are a given and an uncontested fact. Know, learn, and understand this. The literal text, which is the horizontal communication from God, is equated to the earth here below. The word below should be emphasized, as this is our beginning of uncovering and understanding a pattern that will eventuate in revealing an eternal law of Elohim. These eternal laws are called hierarchical order. The second form of communication from Elohim is distinguished when the word states above. Now we have two forms of communication, the horizontal of the earth below and the vertical communication from God that comes from above. The horizontal communication is found in the literal text, but the spirit of the word is found in the vertical communication. Read that again. The horizontal communication is found in the literal text, but the spirit of the word is found in the vertical communication. Within this vertical communication from the Spirit above are found the mysteries of the kingdom. Let me repeat. Within the vertical communication that comes down from above, which is sometimes called manna, this is where the mysteries of the kingdom are found. Mysteries of the kingdom are not found in opinions or imaginations of the intellect. We will connect this eternal law to the written words of Yeshua, but first I want to explain an eternal spiritual dynamic with regard to below and above. This is a very crucial, yet a simple spiritual law and dynamic in the two words below and above. Remember this, and always associate these words or words like them. Associate these two words to spiritual hierarchical order. Anything above, like mountain, is high order. Anything below or down, like the earth, is low order. That is, high or low spiritual order. The kingdom of heaven is entirely about spiritual order that is defined and understood by hierarchy. Again, these two words of order are above and below. What is above, we will come to learn, is called life. What is below, we will come to learn and understand as spiritual death. Virtually every slide of this presentation depicts this high-low, above-below spiritual order in the color scheme of blue and brown. Below are the things of the earth, and above are the things of the spirit. There is a simple example to see this order when we look up three words: 2022 mountain, 1389 hill, and 776 earth. The mountain is always associated with the things of heaven and equated to the hundredfold. The hills are lower in spiritual hierarchy, so the stature of this word is never exalted or glorified like the mountains. The hill is equated spiritually to the 60-fold. Caution: the translators never understood this hierarchical order of the mysteries of the kingdom, so they sometimes translated the 2022 mountain as a hill. The earth is equated to the 30-fold and is disparaged and denigrated spiritually in the poetic texts in judgment. In Genesis 1, the earth is called formless and void. To see the high spiritual order of a 2022 mountain, look at Psalm 50 and 11. Psalm 50 verse 11. We will anchor point all three of these hierarchical order paradigms countless times later in this and any future presentation. This section is on the two sins of blasphemy. The eternal spiritual laws that witness and confirm these eternal truths of the two sins of blasphemy were uttered by the Messiah in Mark 3:28-30, and then again with more elaboration in Matthew 12:31-37. These eternal laws and this continuing hierarchical structure are known as the two sins of blasphemy. Unfortunately, these two hierarchical order of sin types has never been taught or understood. Let's read the shorter Mark passage. Truly I say to you, this is in Mark 3:28. Truly I say to you, all sins shall be forgiven to the sons of men, and blasphemies with which they shall blaspheme. Mark 3:29. But he who blasphemes against the Holy Spirit shall never have forgiveness, but is liable to eternal condemnation. In these two verses alone lies the things of the horizontal earth below and that which is from above, the vertical spirit. It has to be repeated, and it must be noted and registered with the viewer. The horizontal things of the earth are spoken by man, but the eternal laws of Elohim come down to us as the mysteries of the kingdom from the vertical above. Look at the slide and note all the signs of the words of the earth coming from the man down below. The above and below pattern is hard at work in the two sins of blasphemy paradigm. I am going to say it again. You must absorb this 100-fold wisdom. Which sin is of the high order and which sin belongs to the low order? Learn to always try to differentiate the high order words of our text apart from the low order words. Every noun and verb of the book is depicting either a high order or a low order paradigm. This is the above and below pattern of hierarchy, and this will be crucial to see these distinctions as we progress. A blasphemy against the Holy Spirit is never forgiven for eternity. Parenthetical. We cannot anchor point any quotes of the second sin of blasphemy yet, as we do not have the wisdom of the bowl judgments yet. Of the two sins, one is forgiven and forgotten forever, as Leviticus 19:22 and Psalm 79:8 states. This is the first sin of blasphemy. In other words, a murderer, bank robber, car thief, or kidnapper. His sins are forgiven and forgotten forever. It is this blaspheming of the vertical spirit from above that is never, ever forgotten. Moments ago, we said that the vertical spirit above is the manna spirit that comes down. We also said that this manna spirit that comes down from above is known as the mysteries of the kingdom. How can we know this? By inference of these two verses in Mark that say to forsake or reject the spirit of the word or the mysteries of the kingdom. When we do not receive or know the mysteries of the kingdom, we have committed an eternal sin of blasphemy. Read that again. We will continue to close the gap on this understanding as we continue. Now let's look at more words that Messiah uttered that remove this premise from speculation to an eternal law from the vertical spirit from above. John 6:58. This is the bread that came down from heaven, not as your fathers ate the manna and died. He who partakes of this bread shall live forever. Bread is a euphemism and metaphor for spiritual food. Like the word rock, that means the Messiah. Most people already understand that bread is spiritual nourishment. Note that spiritual food comes down from above. This spiritual dynamic and law is eternal. Mortal men are here, down below. Pay close attention to this above and below spiritual pattern. Understanding this spiritual law of upper and lower is critical to our continued study. Where did we first see this eternal law of Elohim but did not understand it? It was in the garden. When Eve took food from the ground and offered that metaphorical spiritual food upward to Adam, Eve broke the eternal law of spiritual protocol. The spiritual food always comes down. Adam was just as guilty because he bought the lie that Eve offered to sell him. Eve was guilty of the buy and sell law of Revelation 13 and 17. 13 verse 17. And Adam was guilty of the same law for receiving it as told in 2 Thessalonians 2, 9 through 11. Note what just happened in that last sentence. We anchor pointed Adam and Eve to a spiritual law in Revelation and 2 Thessalonians. Also, so that women don't get overly sensitive, the genders of Adam and Eve and the dynamics of who is up and who is down is irrelevant. There is no sexism here. This is just an eternal spiritual law of Elohim. In this manner, no one can accuse us of manufacturing an image and idol from our imagination. This is not rocket science, folks. The viewer should be doing the same exact thing of holding every Torah teacher accountable to every word from their mouth. Either hold them accountable or stop listening to them. How do we know that the spiritual food from above that comes down is veiled as the mysteries of the kingdom and written as secrets in the parables? Revelation 19:13 calls the Messiah the Word. Elsewhere, we know that the Messiah is the first and the last, the beginning and the end. The spiritual food, bread, and manna that comes down is the manifest form of the Spirit of Messiah. Psalm 78:2. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will speak dark and secret things of old. In verses 5 and 6 of Psalm 78, we are told to teach those mysteries of the kingdom to our children. Our only problem is that we have never known the meanings of the mysteries of the kingdom to teach them. Let's continue more in John 3. John 3:27. And John answered and said, a man can receive nothing. He receives zero, nada. A man can receive nothing, unless it is given to him from heaven which is above. Yeshua doubles down on this eternal law and commandment in verse 31. It reads, he who comes from above is above all. He who is from the earth is earthly and speaks from the earth. He who comes from heaven is above all. This statement by Yeshua that he who is earthly speaks the things of the earth, this statement needs to be understood within the context of the two sins of blasphemy. The two sins of blasphemy is our model and standard by which to judge this law and commandment of vertical and horizontal sin. We are still following the pattern and paradigm of the higher and lower order. Never let this escape your memory. Every word written in the Word is about top or bottom order. Let's start our investigation of this abrogation of sin of the second blasphemy by looking at how the church teaches the Word. First, observe and ask yourself the obvious. Does the church teach any mysteries of the kingdom? The answer is a categorical and unconditional no. If the church doesn't know the mysteries of the kingdom, then how can they teach the things from above? The church teaches by allegory. Allegory is a fancy word that means conjuring up an image and meaning of the word based on what one thinks from the imagination. Thinking is part of the free will package and gift that we received from the Father in the beginning. Animals don't think. They simply respond to the stimuli of the Spirit from above. View the 3 slides to visualize this eternal law from Elohim. We will take this up in depth in the bowl judgments. Once a mystery is known, it becomes an eternal law of the Spirit. Equations and math formulas are eternal laws that never change. These are the horizontal laws of the earth here below and are called physics. 5 plus 5 equals 10 is an eternal horizontal law of mathematics. If a person adds up these two numbers and gets a different answer other than 10, either this law of physics is broken or the divergent answer is broken. Nobody would disagree that the answer to this 5 plus 5 equation is 10. This is an eternal law. The spiritual metaphor and eternal meaning of the number 10 is that of a king. Number 10 means the kings of the next kingdom age. Absolute and full disclosure of this mystery will be addressed within this presentation. The vertical and eternal spiritual laws of the Spirit work the same way as the eternal laws of physics if we know what the laws are. There are hidden spiritual laws written into each of the parables that are eternal laws from the one mind of Elohim. Therefore, when they are taught, the interpretation should always be the same. So, in like manner of the laws of physics and mathematics, every interpretation of a parable should always be the same. When teaching by the imaginative allegory, every teaching will always, let me repeat, every allegory teaching from the intellect will always be different. They will always differ because there is no one mind denominator. If a teaching originates from a man of the earth, no eternal food of the Spirit from above is in that buy and sell allegory. Every pulpit teaching about the parable of the sower or the talents parable has been taught differently for the last 2,000 years. Why? Because each mind perceives, imagines, and sees a different vision or interpretation of the text. This is precisely the dynamic that Yeshua is speaking of in John when he says that if you are of the earth, you will teach the things of the earth. Imaginations come from the opinions of those men from the earth. The earth is the 30-fold that is below, hierarchically. Look at the visual graphic of the slide. Death and the brown color scheme is below. Life is above. The earth is below and life is above. Hierarchically, life presides and prevails over death. This is a simple-minded demonstration, but we need to start with the basics. All of this thinking, allegory, all of these imaginings of the intellect are inextricably connected by anchor points to the bold judgments of Revelation. We will go into a full and detailed explanation of the bold judgments a little later. I am positing this premise here, and we will come back to tie up this loose end in a few minutes. For the first 2 years after my departure from the church, I endeared myself and dedicated each Shabbat to studying Torah portions. This dedication was done under the guise and semblance of the Hebrew Roots movement. Now that I know what the mysteries of the kingdom are, I can categorically state that during that first 2-year period of study, there was not ever a mention, implied, or any inherent mystery teaching within a single Torah portion study. I had to leave the practice of studying Torah portions because I never learned anything from the Spirit above. After 2 years with the Hebrew Roots group, I had to admit that it was looking more like the church than I could bear. The Hebrew Roots group followed their teaching template and style that they learned in the church. Hebrew Roots embraced the clean foods and the feast, but they still clung to and teach the things of the earth like the church does. Question: where else has the Hebrew Roots group adopted their philosophy and viewpoint and style of teaching from? They took more counsel from men. They picked up on what the ancient Hebrews, the white-bearded ones, the sages, rabbis, what they had been doing for millennia. If the Jewish tradition was to reject the Messiah, and if Hebrew Roots follows the Jewish traditions of study, how will Hebrew Roots ever come to the knowledge of the truth? Or will we forever just have a form of godliness and deny his power like the church does, as we are told in 2 Timothy 3, verses 5 and 7. How can a song, a dance, a shofar, a mezuzah, or a tallit give us wisdom? How does a trip to Israel bear anything resembling hundredfold wisdom? In and of themselves, none of these things can harm a person, but we're looking for hundredfold wisdom. The ancient Jewish traditions was devised to divide up the first 5 books of the Bible and study them in either a 1 or 3 year study cycle. This was all brought to us by the fabricated traditions of men. It was man that decided that Torah portions were to be read in segments. Granted, the ancient Hebrews did not have access to the keys to the mysteries of the kingdom until the Messiah appeared 2,000 years ago. Therefore, it is not necessarily their fault up until they rejected the Messiah 2,000 years ago. Question again: where is the mandate, the law, or commandment to study in this method of Torah portions? There is none. To be sure and to clarify, there is nothing inherently wrong with studying a Torah portion. But according to the second sin of blasphemy and the quote by Yeshua regarding idleness in Matthew 12:36, if there is no fruit in the Spirit from the word above in a teaching, it is an eternal sin of blasphemy. Yeshua calls it idleness. Neither the church nor Hebrew roots knows the mysteries of the kingdom, so they cannot teach them. Every major Torah portion teacher in the mainstream of Hebrew roots has rejected my offer to investigate the mysteries of the kingdom. I regret and I take no pleasure in having to be the harbinger of this news, but it has to come out sometime. The viewer will have to take this message to them. The viewer will have to be the many waters of 2416 life that takes this message to the teachers. Let's address a sidebar on the one mind with regard to the fecklessness of teaching imagined opinions. There is only one truth from above. Teaching opinions, as we have done for the past thousands of years, has left us scratching our heads, confused and dazed with frustration. The one mind of Revelation 17 verses 13 and 17 means that there is only one way to interpret the mysteries of the kingdom. There is only one way to interpret the four beasts. There is only one way to interpret Gog and Magog. There is only one way to interpret the abomination of desolation, Daniel, and Revelation. The only way to interpret these mysteries is to speak the language of the Spirit. The only way to speak the language of the Spirit is to know the mysteries of the kingdom. We are just beginning to understand the mysteries of the kingdom. Divergent opinions have left us formless and void of spiritual content, just as Genesis 1 promised and warned us. This section on the two sins of blasphemy was short, but I needed to introduce it as a spiritual law for the discernment of the diligent seeker. I write extensively on this law and many other written works. Part of the conundrum and challenge of teaching the mysteries of the kingdom is where to begin. I generally begin teaching the mysteries of the kingdom by starting with the sower and talents parables, which gets us immediately to the numbers. Generally speaking, I can only teach on one topic at a time with any sort of comprehensiveness. The bowl judgments is next. After the bowl judgments, we will launch immediately into the parables of Matthew 13 and 25, which will take us directly into the numbers. By understanding the meanings of the numbers, we will then be able to teach all the mysteries of the four beasts of Daniel itself, and then some of Revelation. Before we go there, I want to point out and briefly explain the color scheme of the slide background. The color scheme reflects the above and below pattern and paradigm of hierarchical order that we just learned about. When we get to the section called Three Folds and Four Kingdoms, we will give a comprehensive perspective, this above and below spiritual eternal law. The brown section of the slides represents that of the earth. The brown section is spiritual death, and the blue section is spiritual life. Spiritual 2416 life is the tree of life and the life of the beast. We will anchor point all of these patterns to Daniel and Revelation in due course. We will anchor point the brown section with the false prophet of Revelation. We will also anchor point the two witnesses of Revelation with the blue section of the slide background. We will do all of this from the one mind of Elohim, which is the spirit that comes down from above. What I want the viewer and listener to know is that we will absolutely uncover and reveal all the mysteries of the kingdom. We just need to be patient. I was going to present this whole presentation as one entire episode. However, I decided to break it up into smaller segments. I have no idea how many or where these segment breaks will be. What I want to say about what we have presented so far is that everything spoken of thus far is a setup to understand what will soon follow in future presentations, the two sins of blasphemy. was critically necessary to understand before we move forward. The next chapter is the explanation of the one mind of Elohim as to what the bowl judgments are. Equally as important as the two sins of blasphemy, the bowl judgments will get at the heart of exactly what sin and the abomination of desolation is. The bowl judgment section will also include the eternal spiritual dynamics and laws of the buy, sell, and the guilt sin of the three folds and the four kingdoms. In this first section, I spent considerable time explaining some principles without referencing a lot of scripture. In the next bowl judgment and threefold four kingdoms section, and any section thereafter, there will be considerable dot-to-dot anchor pointing of scriptures and paradigms. This anchor pointing will completely and exclusively indemnify Yahweh and Yeshua as the sole and authentic underwriting authors of the paradigm patterns and laws of eternity.